Hello and welcome back to another video on this channel. Today we're going to be talking, as the thumbnail says, about the real problem with black dwarves and black elves in the new Lord of the Rings series. Now this video isn't going to be discussing deep into the Lord of the Rings lore. Of course, I'll be touching on the aspects of Lord of the Rings lore and the Silmarillion and different concepts. If you know me well, you know that I love Lord of the Rings. It's one of the formative books in my life, alongside of Dostoevsky. I love Tolkien and Dostoevsky, and as such, I have read a lot about Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, the books of Lost Tales, other things like that are very, very interesting and things that I love a lot. However, in this video, we are going to be, let me turn off my Discord. I just heard a notification. But today we're going to be talking about the real problem of having black dwarves and elves in Lord of the Rings. Now, this is nothing to do about race. We're going to be talking about that critique in a bit. We're going to be talking about black elves and black dwarves from quite a few different perspectives. First of all, why in the lore this should not be the case. Also talk about biology. If you haven't known yet, I am quite interested in biology, or at least certain aspects of biology. And finally, we're going to be talking about the real problem, what's actually at stake when we're discussing these issues, so that the conversation isn't moved in a wrong direction. So before we get into this video, I'd like to remind you that if you enjoy this content, make sure to like and subscribe. It really means a lot to me and really helps this channel grow. Of course, if you like any content, then make sure you ask the content for me in the videos or in the comment section below. The reason why I'm making this video is because you guys have asked for this video in a previous video, so as a result, I'm making this video for you. Now, of course, if you want to go to anywhere in this video, I have timestamps in the description below, so you can skip to every area or any area that you want to view. So with that in mind, let us get right into this discussion and say, well, actually, why is it inaccurate to have black elves and black dwarves? Now, in some sources I've seen, there were different elves in Norse mythology, or different elves or dwarves who are black in different situations. They're in different cultures where Tolkien or which Tolkien have interacted with, and that might be correct, but we need to understand that even though Tolkien is indeed interacting with certain mythologies and are taking inspiration from certain mythologies, it doesn't mean that he's trying to create a one-to-one replica of these concepts. Rather, he's trying to make a separate, almost as completely separate, although connected mythology for England as a country, more specifically, and also talk a bit about those different relationships as well with different countries as well. So he is trying to take influence and inspiration from certain aspects, but also developing his own world and own mythos as well. And that's why there's a Valinor instead of like Odin and stuff like that. You don't see Odin as what you see in Norse mythology. You have similar gods as the Valar, but they are indeed different situations. So there are similarities and differences. So as a result, even if we do find a replica or kind of a mirror situation where there are indeed black elves or black dwarves in other cultures, it will be inaccurate to say, well, then as a result there must be black elves or dwarves in Lord of the Rings. Now that's all well and good. We got that misconception out of the way, which I sometimes see on The Guardian and other unused sightings. However, there are, I think, three main reasons why there are indeed no black elves, and one of these is, or dwarves, and one of these is because the biology of creatures, of human beings, of species. And of course, I want to make it very clear that this is on the assumption that the biology of these dwarves, these elves, are quite similar to humans. I'm not saying that it's exactly the same, but there's concepts of melanin and other concepts which I am assuming do indeed apply, of hereditary genes which are passed down from parents to children, and I'm assuming that these concepts and ideas still hold. For example, when I say, okay, there's no black parents, and then there's probably not likely to be a black son, these things which happen in human terms, I'm assuming that these happen as well in the Lord of the Rings in Middle-earth. And of course you may say, well, maybe that's not the case. Maybe these specimen are different. Maybe they're the biology works in a different way. However, I will not grant that assumption just because there's no reason to think that that is the case, because in Lord of the Rings we do indeed see white parents, especially with the human species, and of course with the elves, that is generally the case, and as a result I'm going to be keeping to that trend or that ideas, especially when we see that the properties of the father are often passed down, or the properties of the ancestors are often passed down to the children. For example, like Numenor, they have a similar kind of trait of living longer than other men, or in the same way that elves do indeed pass that trait of immortality to their species, it does suggest that they follow a similar concept and ideas. So as a result, I think we can make two arguments. First of all, since the dwarves were indeed created by Aule the Valar under a mountain in the beginning, we notice that it's impossible for them to have that darker skin because they're not expressed or exposed to sunlight. They're created under the mountain, and that's especially even more developed when we do indeed take into consideration the fact that they were actually born after the elves. The elves were indeed developed mostly in Valinor. They experienced the light of the two trees, especially the older elves, especially like a Galadriel, they experienced the light of the two trees, and as a result they're fairer, and they were created first, and then came after that the dwarves, and then Aule first trying to create them, and then of course Iluvatar said, oh, you shouldn't create them, and Aule almost kills them, but then Iluvatar says, oh, don't kill them, just let them wake up after the creation of the elves. So they come into the story a bit later, but even despite coming into the story a bit later, they do remain underground a lot. They remain under the mountain. You immediately think of things like Erebor, Moria. These are dwarven colonies which are underground, and as a result, it would be unreasonable for there to be black dwarves just because they don't have that exposure to sun, which is necessary to cause that black, the melanin to be exposed or in your skin as a result, which leads to people being darker skinned tones. And that's the same as how Asians and Americans, or especially even Scandinavians, are whiter than people who live in Africa, is precisely because of that exposure to sun is less in different areas of the world. And if I went out and I go fishing a lot, so I am darker skinned than a lot of my other friends who don't go fishing or do outdoor activities as much as I do. So as a result, you can see that there's a direct correlation between the exposure to sun and this color or the tone of your skin. And as a result, unless a dwarf suddenly has a line which is completely exposed to sun all the time, which is not necessarily the case, then we can realize that, well, let's look at dwarves. There's probably not going to be black dwarves, and especially to the extent that we see in the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power trailer. So we notice that is not really about race, it's just about kind of biology, and the same goes with black ancestry, or the ancestry of elves or of dwarves. You look at the elves, you say, well, is there a black elf, a dark-skinned elf, or a man? Well, yes, for men there might be different. Of course, you have the Haradrim, you have other different species or different races of men in Middle Earth, so there might be more of a mix, different skin tones. If there's a black man in Lord of the Rings, I don't think it's much of a problem. However, when you bring it to elves and you bring it to dwarves, we are not exposed to the idea that there are indeed darker skinned dwarves or elves in the lore. What we do not see necessarily is the idea, especially if you look at the Rings of Power trailer. Of course, a lot of this is still speculative. We still don't know exactly what characters these people are, but we do, if we look at the general tree of people that we know, of the Eldar, the Sindar, the dwarves, what we do notice is that in these situations there are no black people, no black elves, no black dwarves, and as a result it becomes inexplicable that there would be a black elf all of a sudden. If there's two white parents, you're never going to have a black kid. In the same way, if you have two black parents, it's very unlikely for you to have a white kid, unless of course the mother cheated on the black dad or the white dad, or whatever the situation is. So as a result, we need to understand that a lot of these problems isn't the fact of, oh, we're against diversity, or we're against a certain expression, or the existence of black people in a certain area. Rather, the main problem is just that, well, this biologically is impossible. It is impossible for there to be a black dwarf all of a sudden when both of the parents aren't black. And if we look at the entire family tree, you'll really have to explain why there is suddenly one black kid, unless there's an entire black tribe of elves which has had interactions with the father, and of course then you have black children. But unless there is that other tribe of elves, which we do see, then that is just impossible. Now, finally, the thing I want to make is that none of this is really about race or different discriminatory ideas. And of course, you look at the media today, and it seems that the moment someone talks about, oh, there's black people, or we don't want black people in a movie, the media thing they think about is, oh, of course you're racist, or of course you're being bigoted, or you're against the representation of black people or certain minorities in film. And that is clearly not the case. It's clearly not correct. Of course, sometimes, yes, it might be due to race, but sometimes at the same time, you have to let common sense win and say, well, not everything is a result of someone's blackness. Just as the same as I'm saying, well, not everything is a result of Asian discrimination, or not everything is a result of sexism. The different treatment towards men and women is not always about sexism. There's the different treatment towards black people and white people or Asian people is not always due to racism. The reason why there aren't black people in Lord of the Rings is not because they don't like black people. It is because it is inaccurate. It is biologically impossible, as we have just established. So as a result, we have to look at the situation and say you have to be reasonable when you're taking into consideration critiques that you see from other people. Not everything is a result of your racism, or not everything is a result of this class struggle or discriminatory worldview that you have. We as a human species have to move beyond this idea of everything is a class struggle, what I discussed in my previous video about how Marxism views ruin society. It's like, not everything is a result of this class struggle, not everything is a result of discrimination. And the moment we start thinking like that, it stops us from actually interacting with what's actually the problem at the core of the situation. This problem of having black elves and dwarves got nothing to do with, oh, we're being discriminatory towards black people. I mean, if there were Asian dwarves or Asian elves, I would be like, what the hell's going on here? Like, I'm like, why would that be the case? There is no Asian or like yellow, I mean, of course there's no Asian elves, but I mean, why on earth is there a yellow elf as well? You'd be like, well, where's the parents? Is that exactly the case? No. So as a result, there's a lot of things which you have to take into consideration when we're discussing the situation. And as a result, we have to be very, very careful when we're classifying different arguments, and we have to move beyond just saying, oh, that's racist or that's discriminatory, which is just inaccurate. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. It really means a lot to me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I have some really interesting and lovely discussions with you people, so I would love to hear your thoughts about this. Stay safe, my friends. See you soon. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.